And I feel truly, truly blessed to be with you today and for the next few days, and to have the opportunity to work closely with your family of villages and your neighborhood team development. I remember 25 years ago, in my culture change journey, when I had to fight with states and regulations that were so ridiculous. I remember a regulation in Oklahoma that said you could only have 2 four-legged animals in a nursing home. And so I suggested that every home in Oklahoma get a bunch of 3-legged animals. Who would have imagined back then how far you all would take this? Who could ever have imagined that? So I feel very humbled to be among you. And when I spoke with Jennifer about these talks and that you wanted us to actually challenge you, share with you things that we thought you should hear, but challenge you, it stopped me for a while, quite frankly, because you challenge yourselves quite a bit. You are not people who sit on and rest on your laurels. But I thought back to my 10th anniversary in culture change, and I thought about a story that Dr. Thomas shared with me. That was about 15 years ago. And how that story really helped me understand a lot about what we were doing and where we were going and why we were doing this hard work. And I want to share that story with you, if that's okay. Didn't think that you were going to be the only ones that got to dress up today. Only this isn't a dress up for me. This is my real hat. Seen better days, hasn't it? Kind of like its owner. This is the story of Grandmother's Garden. Once upon a time, way down south, where I hail from, in a small little village on the outskirts of town in a little cottage, lived a grandmother and her granddaughter. And every day you would find that grandmother and granddaughter out in their backyard, digging in the dirt, growing a beautiful garden. Grandmother's garden was known far and wide, and the local yokels would actually line up on her back fence every day. And just to see this beautiful garden that grandmother and her granddaughter were growing. And they would say, "Grandmother, I don't know how you do it. Those are the most beautiful tomato plants I've ever seen." And when they would do that, you could see the granddaughter's chest kind of expand. And she would say to her grandmother, "Did you hear what they said today about our garden?" Grandmother would never look up from her work. She would be digging in the dirt and pulling weeds. And she would just say, "A garden is as a garden grows." Well, for a long time, the house next door to Grandma was vacant. But one night, on a full moon, a new neighbor moved in. He wore long flowing robes, and he had a long white beard, and he had a pointed hat with a moon and a star and a sun on it. He was a wizard. And he pulled his trunk full of his potions and his spell books up into the house. And he moved in. And the next morning, he went out on his back porch. And he looked at this brown patch of dirt. And he looked over at grandmother's garden. And he saw all the local yokels lined up there, giving their praises to grandmother. And he thought to himself, I could do that. So that night, he pulled out one of his spell books. And he looked through it. I've got it. He went out on his back porch, took his magic wand, abracadabra. There was a garden just as beautiful as grandmother's. The next morning when he came out on the back porch, all the local yokels were lined up on his side of the fence and saying, my goodness, have you ever seen anything like that? Yesterday that was nothing but a brown patch of dirt. Look at it now. And the wizard said, yeah, I can even do better. So that night, he got his spell book out again, looked again, went out on his back porch, abracadabra, poof. My gosh, the plants had grown. They doubled in size, just like that. Corn 10 feet tall, squash as big as an arm. And the next day, the local yokels were lined up 7 deep. They could not believe what their eyes were seeing. And the granddaughter said, Grandmother, look at that. Everybody's over there at the neighbor's house, and nobody's here looking at our garden. And grandmother didn't look up from her work. She just said, a garden is as a garden grows. But all might have been well, except the wizard. You know the wizards. You know how they are. He said, I can do better. That night he got his spell book out again, went out on the back porch, took his magic wand, abracadabra, poof, corn 40 feet high, tomatoes as big as a pumpkin, carrots with shoulders as big as a man, and they could talk. Well, you know how that goes when the vegetables start talking. It's not going to be good, because the squash started yelling at the beets, and the tomatoes smashed themselves, and the corn pulled himself up, his roots out of the ground, and started chasing the potatoes around the yard. And total chaos broke out. They were yelling and screaming at each other and pointing fingers at each other, and they broke out of the backyard and went running up the street to the village. And the lights started coming on in people's houses. What in the world is going on? The sheriff came out onto his front porch in his robe, and a giant tomato splat him in the face. And the villagers got upset, and they said, this has got to stop. We know where this is coming from. They got their pitchforks and their torches, and they marched to the wizard's house. The wizard saw him coming, and he went, oh. They went banging on his door, come out now. He said, okay, put down those torches. And they said, you get rid of this now. Make it go away. He said, okay. So he took his magic wand, alakazam, poof, all gone. And the next day, Out in the back of his house was nothing but a brown patch of dirt. And all the local yokels were lined up at grandmother's house, saying, "Oh, my goodness, grandmother, I think this garden's the best one you've ever had. How do you do it?" And grandmother just said, "A garden is as a garden grows." And a few months later, in the winter, the wizard knocked on the back door of grandmother's house, said, "I wonder if I could borrow a cup of sugar." And grandmother said, "Sure, come on in. Come on in, have a seat, have some tea." And the funniest thing you'll ever see is a grandmother, a granddaughter, and a wizard out in the back of grandmother's house with their hands in the dirt, growing a garden. And that's the end of that story. So what did that grandmother know that granddaughter didn't know? She kept saying, "A garden is as a garden grows." Grandmother knew that there's no magic spells to growing a garden. It takes hard work. It takes getting down in the mud and getting dirty and sweat on your brow. The garden teaches us about patience and persistence. Grandmother knew that without the hard work, you don't have a garden. You really have nothing. Grandmother knew that a garden doesn't come from the gardener. It's not about her. It's not about her ego. It comes through your hard work. It comes through you. That garden will teach you humility. Because you can be doing everything you think is right, and you might end up with one squash. Humility. It's not about your ego. Failure is a part of that garden's process. Understanding that you can be doing everything right and still fail. But that doesn't stop you from growing the garden or coming back the next season and planting again. And there are seasons to a garden. Grandmother knew that. There's a time to warm the soil. There's a time when you plant the seed, a time when you tend the garden, a time to reap the harvest, and then the frost comes. Every part of that, every season is vital to that process. You can't skip over any of those seasons. They're all important. If we try to rush things, plant when it's frost on the ground, what do you think will grow? Nothing. If you try to yell at the plants to get them to grow, do you think they'll grow? No. The gardener has to honor each of those seasons. And the frost has a huge purpose in your garden. Frost is a time when the garden rests. Because if you continue to try to plant and replant, you will deplete the soil. The garden has to rest. The garden doesn't die, the plants die, go back into the soil and nourish that soil so that when you come back to plant again, it will be richer. The soil will be richer and the roots can be deeper. So honor the frost and rest. Grandmother knew that bigger or more isn't always better. We have to consider how we're measuring our garden. Just to keep adding more plants and adding more plants to it, or trying to push the plants to be bigger, is not better. You want to spend your time getting that soil rich. That's where the best gardens come from. This rich soil. Grandmother knew that she didn't grow the plants. She created the conditions for the plants to grow. And when she did that, when she spent her time creating those conditions, then those plants could be deep and enduring. Grandmother knew that there are always going to be pretenders. There will always be people who want what grandmother had. But they won't want to put in the hard work to get what grandmother had. And yes, they may get some attention. But did grandmother care? No. She wasn't there for the people who were standing at her fence giving her compliments. She was there because the work was good work. So no matter what attention she got or someone else got, she continued her good work. And then, when everything fell apart at the wizard's house, what did she do? She invited him in. She didn't judge him. She didn't find fault with him. She invited him in and taught him what she knew. I think there's a lot of lessons for all of you in this story of Grandmother's Garden. A lot of lessons that you can learn as you continue growing your gardens. As you celebrate these 10 years as organizational gardeners and begin planning your next 10 years, I want you to think about, who do you choose to be? What is your purpose? Who do you want to be? And I'm going to challenge you to become gardeners of the human spirit. Gardeners for the human spirit, sorry. I want you to put yourself into service of the human spirit. What do I mean by that? Well, there's two roles for people who choose to be gardeners for the human spirit. First is to lead people back to an understanding of who we are as care partners and human beings. Sometimes we forget that. It gets covered up in our busyness. We forget why we do this work. And the second role of a gardener for the human spirit is to create those conditions for our basic human qualities of compassion, generosity, community, and love to be evoked no matter what. No matter what else is going on in the world. No matter how much of a staffing crisis you have, no matter what your budgets are, how many complaints you have, what the regulators are doing to you, whatever the crisis of the day that's happening, that you know that within your communities, these innate qualities of humanness will come forth in everyone who lives and works in your community. You all have been blessed, all of us have, to not only have meaningful work, what a blessing that is, but you have been blessed to be the benefactors of some of our world's greatest teachers. Think about an elder who challenges you the most. Anybody have a problem coming up with somebody? No? Y'all got a picture in your mind. Maybe 2 or 3. Stop thinking of that person as a problem. Because really, that person is your greatest teacher. That person is teaching you everything you need to know about what it takes to be a human being. Teaching you about patience and tolerance and unconditional love and compassion and forgiveness. I want you to take those lessons and share them with each other first, but then go out into your lives in the rest of the world and share those lessons with every single person that you come in contact with. We live in challenging times. We live in a world where ego and greed are covering up our basic innate qualities of compassion and love. And other people aren't as lucky as we are. They don't get the lesson of how to be a human being. And people are suffering. Their human spirits are crying and dying. I'd like to do an experiment. If you have ever in your lifetime had a blow to your human spirit, would you stand up? Any blow. Someone who found fault with you, someone who thought you weren't enough, someone who yelled at you. Thank you. It's what I thought. There is not one person in this room, in your organization, in your communities, in your cities, in your country, or in this world, on this planet, that has not been wounded in their human spirit. And that is becoming our predominant way. We've lost our elders, and our human spirits are being crushed on a daily basis. You can do something about that. You are the benefactors of the lessons of the greatest compassion there is. How to care for someone who pisses you off. How to show love and compassion to someone who doesn't deserve it. So take those lessons out with you, and I don't care who you come across in your daily lives, share them with them. Because they need it. So how do we become a gardener for the human spirit? It's really an art. It's not a science. But there is a path to mastery, and I just want to share a few ways that I try to challenge myself to be a better gardener for the human spirit. Because mastery is not something you'll ever achieve, but it's something you strive for constantly. First of all, adopt a dwelling mind. As the Zen master says, the Western form of laziness is to be busy. Oh, we're all so busy. We wear it kind of as a badge of honor now. We try to one-up each other about how many emails I have in my inbox. And we rush to solve other people's problems. We like to see ourselves as the fixers. We're caring people, after all. I can fix your problem. We can't even fix our own problems, people. You can't fix other people's problems. And when you do that, when you try to rush to solve problems, and then you go about to the next problem, and you try to solve it, and then pretty soon, in about a month or so, you're back at the first problem because guess what? You didn't solve it. Because you're always coming from the past. There's two ways of decision making. One is from the past and one is from the future. To access the future, you have to adopt a dwelling mind. That means you have to suspend all of your ego and your judgments and your beliefs. You have to come together with shared values, sit down and discuss whatever the problem is, collaborate on it, and then go be quiet somewhere. Take the time to sit in the discomfort of an unresolved problem and just be. And I don't care what that looks like. You can take a walk in nature. Wow, we're out here at a beautiful place. You can meditate, you can pray. You can go to sleep and sleep on it. But if you don't create that space of suspension without your judgment and your past paradigms coming in, if you don't create that emptiness for the future to unfold, if you don't listen, stop and be quiet and listen, you will constantly be making the same mistakes over and over. Because solutions don't come from you. They come through you. If you will take the time to let go and let come. Equip yourself with these two tools. Insight and compassion. Insight is that clarity of knowing what's going on around you. But even more importantly is to know what's going on inside of you. That self-awareness of your emotions and your feelings, your judgments. Being aware of what's going on in you and why you're making decisions a certain way. And why you're behaving a certain way. Stepping back from those emotions and deciding then how you want to behave. Choose your behavior. Don't let your emotions choose it for you. Having that insight is an incredible tool for growing a wonderful garden. Most of the harm that has happened to our human spirits has come from people just reacting from their automatic paradigms and their emotions, not taking the time to know yourself and choosing a response. And compassion. Vow right now, today, to never, ever again use fear or intimidation as a means to get your way with anyone. No one ever grew in those conditions, fear and intimidation. They might do what you ask, but then they'll be looking for another place to work. You will hurt their human spirit by doing that, and your own. adopt compassion in every thought, word, and deed as the tool to growing a beautiful garden for the human spirit. See your organization as a living system, a living organism. I think you already do a lot of this, collaborating, learning, being a learning organization, taking information from all sources, not just from the leadership, and learning and adapting as you go. That's how living organisms react. But you have to see learning not as a straight line here to there. See learning as a spiral. You will pass by the same learning over and over and over again in your life. Hopefully, if you're paying attention and you're believe in learning and growing yourself, then as you pass by that same learning again and again, your understanding of it will deepen. I'm now writing my third book on leadership in elder care because I want to learn more about it. And as I finish each book, my learning has accelerated to a deeper and deeper understanding. Same thing with anything you're doing. Don't just hit it once. As you live it, learn more. Take it deeper. Understand the interconnectedness of everything. The institutional model tries to separate us. It puts us into departments and job descriptions and hierarchy and shifts. And it creates an us and them kind of culture. What you need to understand to be a gardener of the human spirit is there is no us and them. There is only we. You are connected to every living thing on this planet. And everything you do impacts the whole. Your work as leaders in growing a garden for the human spirit is to find where those constituencies or tribes are, the us and them situations. Find them, they're everywhere. Human beings arbitrarily come up with reasons to be mad at somebody or be different from somebody. And when those tribes bump into each other, there's trouble. Your job as a leader is to break down the us and them culture and bring people into we, into community, with an understanding that we are all one. And then make your shoulders strong. I can see from this morning and all the wonderful stories that you already have strong shoulders. You could quit right now and you've left an amazing legacy. But this is not work that you do just in your career or for a little while. Work of growing a garden for the human spirit is a lifetime challenge. To do that, you have to take a stand, and you have to stand there. You have to have strong shoulders, because just as you stood on the shoulders of people who came before you, others will come after you, and they will stand on your shoulders. And because you stood for something, and you did not flee, you did not fear, you did not flinch, They will be able to leap forward because of who you were and who you chose to be. These are challenging times for all of us. But they're exciting times also for elder care. For never before have we had so much knowledge, so much experience, so many wonderful hearts of people who want to dedicate their lives to making the world a better place. You have been chosen to be those people. This is your time. Please stand and abide. Thank you.